Hello everyone, it's John Pollock and Robin Black with you. Welcome to Fight News Now. Lots to discuss on today's show. We're going to go back to Saturday night, UFC 204, happening in the early morning hours in Manchester, England, with the main event getting into the octagon at about 4:30 in the morning, Robin, which was nuts. And what might have been even more crazy was the level of fight we got out of these two middleweights. I thought this was an unbelievable main event. And for Dan Henderson, short of winning that title, what a way to go out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. I was talking to James Garcia, who makes all the great graphics you see here. And James, in his own way, was watching that fight saying, it's almost a better story. To go for it, to strive for it, to chase it, and not have it fulfilled in its own way feels like a more modern Hollywood ending. And that's kind of true. But those of us who were cheering for Dan Henderson, and at times everybody should have been cheering for Dan Henderson, it's sad to see him get right there. The controversy's great. The debate on whoever won is great. But I'm not the judge. Twitter's not the judge. There's three of them. And your job is to convince those guys. And that's what Michael Bisping did.
How did you feel, watching it that night? Were you scoring it as you were watching the fight? And what did you think at the end? Because when that fight was over, I had a 47-47 draw, and I thought there was a wide range of scores that you could expect and that you could also defend.
Yeah, you can probably defend almost all of them in a really close fight. And the people who will defend the hardest are the ones that are the most passionate. If you love Michael Bisping or you love Dan Henderson, you're going to fight for that score. You're going to fight and of course, that's what the UFC loves. That's what any business loves: engagement, debate, argument. For me, as you went into round 5, I was blown away by how much Dan had in the tank. And that really was part of his game plan. Game plan A, conserve energy and probably knock him out with that right hand. In game plan B, through the conservation of that energy, be in position to try to win round 5 if you can get the first 2 in the books. And he brought it right down to that wire. I had Mike win in round 5. I really did. You know, he landed more shots. There was an irrelevant takedown. If we wanted Dan Henderson to win that round 5, we did it because the feel-good nature of him coming back and doing that felt great. But if you just look at the way you're supposed to score it, which is how those 3 judges did, that was a Michael Bisping round, and that was the difference. But your tie comes from a 10-8 first round, no doubt.
Yes.
And that is absolutely possible, without question. We don't see a lot of those these days, but within the scoring criteria, go ask Big John. I'm pretty sure that could have very reasonably been a 10-8 round.
Yeah, it was an outstanding fight, and I think if we're looking at this from just a logical standpoint as well, with all the middleweight fights coming out, this was probably your best scenario. Dan Henderson goes out with a legendary fight. I think if you're a big Dan Henderson fan, you can go to your grave saying Dan Henderson won that fight. Michael Bisping keeps the title. You have a champion that it's almost incredible. We've never seen this before, that of the big middleweight fights coming up, whoever emerges as the challenger, you can almost guarantee Michael Bisping will be the underdog in that fight, which is such a unique dynamic for a champion and challenger. And you have so many options at 185, whether it's the Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero winner, Luke Rockhold is going to fight Jacare. We have Gegard Mousasi, who looked great on Saturday night. And throw into that Robert Whittaker and Derek Brunson that are also going to fight. There is so much at middleweight at the moment.
Yeah, and hey, listen, I don't know what it is, and I don't know when it'll ever change, but how can Michael Bisping be constantly thought of, constantly underappreciated? Most wins now ever in UFC history. Most significant strikes, I believe, ever in UFC history. I think George St. Pierre is the only guy who spent more minutes in that cage ever in UFC history. So what is it? What does the guy have to do? Is it because he talks and entertains? Is it because he makes a lot of money? Is it because he gets who knows what it is, but it may go on forever. And at the same time, there's something in the nature of how this man fights where even when he wins a close fight where he gets hurt, or he comes back from adversity, or he has a great fight where he makes you not work well, people still won't give him his due. I'll give him his due. Michael Bisping is Michael Bisping's fighter of the year, for sure. And Michael Bisping's a Hall of Fame fighter.
I think with Michael Bisping now, I mean, you look at this year of where he was on January 1st versus today. It's incredible what he has done in this year alone. Now, Gegard Mousasi was an interesting one. He defeats Vitor Belfort, and just outlining those fights, Robin, we could get the winner of Weidman Romero and the winner of Rockhold and Jacare as the next 2 title fights at middleweight. If you are Gegard Mousasi, are you eyeing 205 pounds? Because he could go up at this point. He might be 1 fight away from a championship fight at 205 as opposed to 18 months maybe, and you're going to have to take 1 or 2 fights in that time period. I think that's a logical question you could be asking if you're Gegard Mousasi, who has fought at 205, was ready to fight Daniel Cormier on a few days' notice back at 200.
It's true. Man, you got to be a fan of how this guy fights, and you got to recognize this is one of the great fighters in the world. You saw how great he looked. He was patient, he was smart, and he did everything right to create the scenario to win that fight, and he does it over and over again, and he can do it against almost anyone. I forgot that he said he wanted to fight Cormier. That just shows you where he's at. Maybe that is the best choice, because just being one of the great fighters, that alone doesn't do it anymore, as we know. I love hearing him speak and seeing what a realist he is. You know, most people go out and demand it's their turn. He knows that it just doesn't work that way. Somebody asked him at the press conference about fighting George St. Pierre or Anderson Silva or something.
No, I won't get that kind of a fight.
Get that. He's a realist, and that's admirable. We live in a world where people have fantasies that somehow you can look on websites and they'll say, chase your dreams, anything's possible, but there's 16 other people doing it. So it's tricky. You should be a fan of that guy, though. He's a fantastic fighter.
Few other notable performances on this main card. We had Jimi Manuwa. That, as I said, at 205 pounds, you get a victory like that, it's the equivalent to me of like 3 wins at middleweight, because you look at the idea of Cormier defeating Anthony Johnson, John Jones isn't around, Jimi Manuwa, Ryan Bader, these are your options at light heavyweight. So that becomes a very big win over someone who was very much favored in Ovince St. Preux.
Yeah, I pictured St. Preux being able to draw Manuwa aggressively forward. He knocked out Cummins, getting super aggressive forward, knocked him out with an uppercut. He knocked out Shogun with slamming the door of the left hook as Shogun blasted forward. Manuwa was sort of the same prototype, and this is a guy who can do that. But Manuwa's presence and the way that he expressed himself made OSP very much gun-shy to be able to deal with that. And as soon as he shut down his focus on what he does well, Manuwa was just going to feast on him. It was really, really cool performance. Really great one. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. You start looking down a list. If DC goes ahead and beats AJ again, and that's a great fight, man. That's
hardly a given.
Yeah, hardly a given. Either way, either one of those guys wins that fight, and who's the next guy calling? Jimi Manuwa might be the guy.
He's suddenly in that picture. Did you learn anything more watching Stefan Struve and his performance against Daniel Omalanchuk? This is someone that has certainly struggled at heavyweight. There have been huge aspirations placed on his shoulders, and it was a performance. He needed a big victory in this fight, because as someone that wants to be a heavyweight contender, which I wouldn't classify him as today, you can't be losing to someone like Daniel Omalanchuk.
No, he does keep improving, and I see footage of him in the gym, and this is an incredible athlete for, what is he, 30 feet tall? Like, this is a big dude, and the way that he's capable of moving. I thought he did what he needed to do in that fight. You know, I was watching Cormier and Cruz, and they were having a dispute over whether he should keep it at distance, or Cruz is brilliant, thought he should bring him in tight and take him down. When he did that, that showed that area of his game. He can submit guys off his back. I didn't like seeing him get touched by a guy with a foot less reach.
Yep.
That's been something he's dealt with ongoing, but he's aware of it. His coaches are aware of it. He's a work in progress that keeps getting better, and he's still young. I mean, he has been knocked out a few times, but I want to see this guy grow to his potential, and there's still lots of room for him to do that.
His biggest benefit is that even after all these fights he's had in the UFC, he's still very young. And I think that the work that he's doing now at the Black Zillions with Henry Hoof, that's not something that's going to transform him overnight. It's going to be a number of fights that we can look back on how he's utilizing this reach, because it's this tag that it's almost as though it's always just thrust upon him. It's just the talking point for Stefan Struve, regardless of improvements he shows.
100%. And a lot of the time that's just follow somebody around, and people who don't really study this kind of stuff just keep repeating it. Oh, he's the worst at using his reach. That is not true. He is very good at using his reach. We just know he can get even better. And we saw it at different times in this fight, and we'll see him get better and better and better at it. What? We think we're able to discern this, but him and his coaches aren't. This guy will keep improving.
Last thing, Conor McGregor, he was fined $150,000 for his role in the water bottle throwing incident. He will also have to do 50 hours of community service and participate in an anti-bullying campaign, probably not with Jeremy Stevens at a press conference. Was this overboard? Was this justified? Do you have any opinion on the fine levied?
The bullying campaign is great, and the community service is great. That's what you do with a guy like this. But these guys just arbitrarily he needs to be humbled. They're just nonsense over the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
That is going to wrap it up for us. We will be back with Fight News Now. Tune in Monday through Friday, 6 Eastern, with Robin Black, John Ramdine, and myself.